Hey everyone, I'm Sean Twombly, National Executive Director of Pi Sigma Alpha, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight for this next in our Centennial series of sessions talking about working on Capitol Hill. Now, tonight we're going to have an opportunity for lots of questions because I know that's what each of you want, but I'm really lucky to bring in my friend Brent Sullivan this evening. He's joining us to provide a bit of inside baseball on the job market on Capitol Hill and how you can find your way there. Now, the job market in DC is a fascinating one. And with the pandemic and turnover that's likely to come from the upcoming elections, there's a lot to learn. So he's going to share a bit. Then we're going to take your questions, and we're going to do that part. Now, as he's going to share, everyone has a DC story. I've got my own. I came here in 1993, literally a bag of clothes, a tennis racket, and a frying pan. Didn't have a job. Had just graduated from Syracuse as a new Pi Sigma Alpha member. Lived in the dorms at American University for 2 weeks. Found a job 3 days later, found an apartment with friends, and next thing you know, you're moving on. So each of you is going to have your own story at some point here. But first, let me introduce Brent. He's going to tell you his story and what comes next. So Brent, he's the president and founder of Time on the Hill, and it's a firm that specializes in preparing you for a job on the Hill. Now, as I've heard him preach before, there are thousands of positions. You only need one of them. So
That's right.
Brent is a classic DC success story, and I hope he'll share a bit of his own story because it's a good one. So he launched Time on the Hill back in 2012. After a short stint working on the House side, he built a network that today helps countless people, including many Pi Sigma Alpha members, find their foot in the door, and that everyone wants that foot in the door. So as one review of Time on the Hill said, and I had to share this, he's more than just a career consultant. He's a motivator, a strategist, and a reliable guiding light throughout the often cryptic process that is congressional staffer job hunt. Now, maybe that sounded a little over the top, but as well as I know him, that's really true. Brent's been a trooper coming to the Pi Sigma Alpha National Student Research Conference, helping us out there, and I know the lines of students that wait to talk with him are often long. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to my buddy Brent. I'm going to go off camera for a little bit here. We'll be back to answer questions shortly. I'll turn it over to you, Brent.
My thanks to you for that. I'm very grateful for that, and I'll just share a little bit about my path, which is slightly different in that I was older than a lot of individuals that want to get involved in DC. I went to the University of Richmond, where it was very easy to serve downtown at the General Assembly, and I loved it. And that's kind of where I was fascinated by the political process. I was not horrific, but not great academically at the University of Richmond. I was not someone who could write a beautiful 24-page articulate, Larry Sabato approved paper. I physically loved being at the General Assembly and just soaking it all in and just being in the halls of the assembly. And then in 2004, worked on the presidential election campaign, and then I wouldn't say left politics altogether, but went to New York City and worked at a nonprofit for 2 years, and then went to a big healthcare company for 4.5 years. And so I really decided for myself to get on Capitol Hill at 28 years old, which is young, but it felt very old at the time because so many people on Capitol Hill are very young. And when I did finally say, I'm going to Capitol Hill, I want to focus on being involved in the legislative process, writing the legislation, navigating the legislation through the House, through the Senate, I had no idea what to do. And the process on Capitol Hill is very daunting. And I'm so grateful for people like Sean and others who are doing everything they can to support great individuals who want to pursue their career in public policy and political science. And I just fumbled and stumbled my way through, and it took me 74 coffees and interviews to finally get my job on the Hill. And I did. And I started off as a fellow. I interviewed to be an LC, and they said I did well in the interview, but there was a budget cut, so they got rid of the job. And I said, I'm willing to do the job anyway. If I have to do what I have to do to get a foothold into Congress, I'll do the job. I wrote letters for quite a while, executive correspondence for a member of Congress from Texas, and then got a job as a healthcare legislative assistant and really loved it. My first member was wonderful. My second member was a disaster. That's how life works. You're not going to have perfect bosses. You're not going to have perfect companies. And then I said to myself, I know that there are people that badly want to serve on the Hill like I did, and I wanted to help those people. And so we are rapidly approaching 10 years at Time on the Hill of helping thousands of people who want to serve in public service and support their districts and support their constituents. And the tough part about Congress is that the system is unlike any other company you would ever imagine. And the way we hire in Congress and the way to get a job in Congress is nowhere to be found. However, the beautiful thing about it is that you're not competing against 15,000 folks that went to Harvard and MIT. So everybody who's committed and serious about working in Washington, D.C. can be successful if they have a plan and if they execute the plan, because it's extraordinarily challenging, but the bar is not exceedingly high. It's not out of reach. If a guy like me can get a job on Capitol Hill, everybody can work hard and get a job on Capitol Hill. And so what I would love to do tonight is to try to answer any questions. I know it's a stressful time. If you've already graduated and you're trying to get a job, I know there's anxiety. If you have no idea what's going to happen on the 3rd, I know there's anxiety. I don't know who's going to win, but I know what's going to happen regardless of who wins. I know what's going to happen if Joe Biden wins. I know what's going to happen if Donald Trump wins. I was there when thousands of people lost their opportunities when Hillary Clinton did not win. There's ups and downs in politics. That's how it always goes. So I can answer any questions you have about how to navigate this process and what the landscape looks like. And so please put your questions in the comments, and I'll do whatever I can to try to provide as much support and help tonight as I can.
So Brent, why don't we kick it off with let's start with what happens after the election. So if you could just run through the scenarios in your mind about what's going to play here in terms of either a Republican administration continuing or a Democratic administration jumping in, and what that does on the Hill.
The night that State Senator Twombly becomes Congressman Twombly, the people that supported the campaign and the people that voted for the individual immediately believe that you're a congressman. They don't care that you're not sworn in until January. They want you to start working for them right now. And in that moment, every newly elected member says, oh my goodness, I need a staff. I need to build a team because I need to start getting to work for all of my constituents. There is a huge belief that if I work on the campaign, we're all going to Washington, D.C. That is insanity. That mathematically does not add up. There are only 15,000 congressional staffers in Congress. There are well over 100,000 campaign volunteers. So imagine playing musical chairs with 100 people and there are only 15 chairs. So you have to have a plan. If Joe Biden wins, 10,000 people in the administration are losing their jobs. That means throughout the entire administration, there are very low-level, young staffer, entry-level jobs that can be achieved. The senior-level staff in the Congress, both House and Senate, have already told me that they're looking to leave. They're tired of the Hill. They're ready to leave. So they have already started to put feelers out there to leave the Congress to go to the White House. What that means is the mid-level staffers in Congress will ascend into the top-tier positions, leaving a lot of room for the junior level positions for people to break in. If Trump keeps his position as president, but the Senate flips, there will be people from the Democratic campaigns that try to go to the Senate. There will be plenty of House members that try to go to the Senate, and you'll have a similar, but not nearly as aggressive as if the White House changes hands. You have Schedule A, which are federal employees, and Schedule C, which are appointed officials. All of the top tier senior officials, what's left of them? I mean, the Treasury right now is empty. It is a skeleton crew working at the Treasury. if you are focusing on getting into the White House or getting onto Capitol Hill and you're a Democrat, you really need Joe Biden to win badly. If Joe Biden wins, the shifting will be unbelievable and it will be a frenzy. If the Democrats take over the Senate, then the shifting will be unbelievable. And there are always going to be new members. So there are going to be Democrats who surprisingly lose. There will be Republicans who catch us off guard that lose. And change means new opportunities for a job. So now is the time to do two things. Number one, prepare your materials. Does my LinkedIn look great? Does my resume look great? And number two, who do I want to work for? So start looking up those House members that I'd love to work for and start working at those U.S. senators that I like to work for and have a strategy. Don't just run around and say, I don't care, I'll work for anybody. Members really dislike hearing that. Have a strategy and have a plan, and you'll be in tip-top shape.
Awesome. So let's check in with Jaden. Jaden Klobuk writes, thanks for doing this. I'm wondering when the application process starts for members of Congress. Does it vary? So how do you get going here? What's the first step, Brent?
If you basically got your seat in the primary, so you're a Democrat that made it through the primary and it's a Democrat plus 14 district, there's a good chance that that candidate hasn't been doing a whole lot for the last couple of months, and they may or may not already have someone in mind to be their chief of staff. I will tell you that campaign managers are very squeamish about talking about staffing up an office before they have officially been elected. I think they don't want to jinx it. I think they feel that it's a little premature. I can tell you that right now, individuals who are the presumptive winner are already beginning the process of aggressively seeking their chiefs of staff. Some of them already do have their chiefs of staff. They have to be careful because you can't really make an offer until you've officially been elected. So if you are interested in working for a particular member, feel free to reach out to the campaign, but be very, very sensitive about how you go about that. It's okay to send an email to the campaign manager, the campaign director. A lot of folks will tell you it's important to apply to the Democratic or Republican job banks, which you should do, but they're like a 20,000 resume abyss of resumes. So that's not a very effective way of going about it. But just be sensitive to the fact that the person you may be talking to that's on the campaign, they might want the job that you're trying to get. So they're not going to be thrilled about talking with you. If you're talking to somebody about being a staff assistant for this new member and that person wants to be a staff assistant, things could go poorly. So be really careful. And then make sure that when you're doing your email outreach, be very, very sensitive. If you know who you're talking with, if you worked on the campaign together, that helps a great deal. Because for whatever reason, I've noticed this year that campaign managers are very irritable about talking about staffing until they officially win. And the last thing I'll share about this is that the hierarchy of building out an office is find your chief, then find your scheduler, because if you don't have a phenomenal scheduler, the whole operation is going to be an unorganized mess. Then take someone who worked their tail off, who has a great attitude, who knows the district, to be the staff assistant. Then you build out your comms director and your LD. And once you have the LD, then you focus on your legislative correspondent and your legislative assistants. You're not going to hire your legislative assistants until you have an LD, because that could cause serious problems down the road. The LD isn't getting the job done, and the LD says, well, look at these LAs that I didn't pick that are not doing the job well. So in order to just get rid of that friction, hire your LD and have the LD be a part of the process to hire the LAs and the LC. If you're trying to break in for the first time, remember that you're competing against staffers that already have some Hill experience. And many of those staffers are working for members who are retiring. So you need to show that you can write, provide writing samples. You can show that you know the member. I was there the whole time on the campaign. I know his issues. I was at all of his speeches. I know his functions. And then last but not least, make sure that you know the district like the back of your hand. I know the high schools, I know the fire departments, I know the manufacturing companies, I know the big interstates, so that I might not know the Hill as well as someone else, but nobody knows the 16th Congressional District of Texas better than I do. And so that's how you can really win.
So that's a really important point. And Sophia, who's a member from Greensboro College, wrote, are there any minimum requirements for working on the Hill, citizenship? And she actually asks whether a current or previous resident in the area of the congressperson is that important. And so to your point, if you can do some research as an applicant, even though if you don't live in that area, there's an opportunity for you to at least look like you're prepared. What about the other minimum requirements for getting a first job on the Hill? Another person asked about that they're on an F1 visa. What are the requirements in that sense?
So there's a couple important things in there. The first is you don't need to be a U.S. citizen to be a Hill staffer. I believe that the simple requirement is that you must put in an effort within 5 years to work on citizenship. But you don't have to be a U.S. citizen to be a congressional staffer, number one. Number two, you can have literally any office in all of Congress for most visas in order to stay in DC and work on the Hill. So the folks that I've helped, we help them get an internship. They then share that they have this internship and the visa gets extended. The second part of that question, and correct me if I'm wrong, is simply geographic ties. It is phenomenally helpful to share with the chief of staff that you're from the state or from the district, that you know the area. Couple that with, if you're going to be a staff assistant, geographic ties are almost mandatory, because people call you all day long and say, well, what part of Texas are you from? You say, well, I'm actually from Philadelphia. That does not rub constituents the right way. So having geographic ties can help you get the job. And also it can really help you over the other candidates. But it's the only position where geographic ties are pretty mission critical. I've seen so many chiefs, so many LDs, so many legislative assistants, so many communications directors who have no geographic ties to the geographic region of a senator or member, but they're very good at booking interviews. They're phenomenal about healthcare issues. They're phenomenal about trade issues. And so when you're thinking about your geographic ties, think about all of the members, House and Senate, that are from Pennsylvania. If you have ties to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, focus on Democrats or Republicans from those states and leverage that hook and leverage the fact that you know that area. Because in one of my interviews, the chief said to me, I told her that I knew the Senate president because he represented my county in Pennsylvania. And she said, oh, you live in Pennsylvania? I said, yes. And I don't know how I didn't put a fine point on that. But I think that she was not sold on me until she learned that I was from Pennsylvania. And I think she decided to hire me in that very moment because I was from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So geographic ties can be a big deal.
Now, I bet. So a bunch of questions about internships to job in the chat. We've got a lot of students who are currently juniors. They want to think about their summer coming up. Is an internship a good first step toward getting your foot in the door in a congressional office? Or do I have to be in it, or is that not required at all?
So I'm going to work off of the premise. Do we know if that person, okay, let's assume that person is currently not employed. Okay. If you have a choice between being unemployed and submitting resumes into the abyss, or getting $1,800 a month and a Metro card by being a congressional intern, where you have an office, you have a badge, you have an email address, a brent.sullivan@mail.house.gov, having an internship is an absolute no-brainer. It is phenomenally powerful to call a chief of staff rather than some random business or some random company and say to them, how has this person been doing? He's great. He's a team player. He's been awesome in our office. He does whatever we need him to do. He comes in early. Then some random person, chiefs of staff really trust other chiefs of staff. And it can go the other way. If you don't really put in the effort, if you're a lousy intern, a chief of staff is probably going to say, yeah, I don't know if the Congress is for this person. So I'm in a massive, huge believer in an internship. They're paid. It ranges anywhere from $500 a month. The max is $1,800. I love internships. It's also phenomenal for the candidate. You could get yourself a fellowship or an internship, and you could do it for 2 months and say, you know what, I don't like this. I don't like DC. I don't like Capitol Hill. And you can move on with your life. You tried it and it just wasn't for you. Rather than work for 6 months to get a job, you get a job and you hate it. Now you're stuck. So I'm a huge fan in internships for a number of different reasons. And I've helped hundreds of people go from unemployed to intern to staffer because they were great interns and the office loved them. And they either hired them or told other offices that we have a guy who's amazing. If we had an opening right now, we would hire them. Unfortunately, we don't. This is an amazing hire. You should hire this guy.
And step one for that, Brent, is what? If someone wants an internship, they're a junior right now, or even though they're a graduated senior looking to just get their foot in the door, is it simply emailing the chief of staff? Is it looking for an open call for interns? What are we asking students to do today?
Now we're getting into the fun technical stuff, right? Now we're starting to really do the steps. You need to send an email to the legislative director in every single office that's of interest to you. And I'm going to give you verbatim the script that you write to the LD. And I'm also going to tell you what you need to do to get this email where you need it to be. Dear Director, let's pretend that I'm the LD in an office, any Republican or Democratic office. The subject line should be, thank you, capital T, capital Y. Dear Director Sullivan, thank you in advance for your time. By way of background, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about service as a legislative intern. Your wisdom would be greatly appreciated. If you have time for a very informal, this is the phrase that has helped me thousands of people, very informal, so that it's no pressure. I'm not going to ask you to hire me. I'm not going to ask you about interviews. It's just, I'm trying to learn. Very informal telephone call. I would be grateful. Sincerely, Brent Sullivan. And then attach your one page. You're 22 years old and you're just getting going. There's no 2, 3, 4 page resumes. 1 page resume, PDF, not Microsoft Word, because it looks like trash on a phone. So in that email, the signature needs to be your name, your email, and your LinkedIn link, so that this random legislative director who doesn't know you at all can click to find out who you are. So I'm telling you that absolutely send your emails to the LDs. The LDs will then give you feedback. Because of COVID, we're not doing an internship, or they'll say, yes, we would love to have an intern. We're short-staffed. And just so you know, in terms of interns, the Congress is horrendously short-staffed on interns right now. The Republican leader typically has 6 or 7 interns at all times. At the moment, they have 3. So that's unbelievable. Some offices will not do internships, but many are still doing internships, and there's a lot less competition. You usually have 6,000 interns in the summer here in DC. This year we had none. Well, we had many, but we didn't have 6,000. So you're not competing against thousands and thousands of people. And a lot of kids don't know how to hack the system. They don't know how to email LDs and how to get their email addresses. So it's even easier. There's less competition. So if you're an active guy, if you're an ambitious guy or girl, this is a great time to get after it, because a lot of people are be at home Netflix. It's not even like you're playing chess and they're playing checkers. You're playing chess and they're watching Netflix. So you send your email to the LD, make sure your resume is tight, Make sure your LinkedIn is tight, a great photograph, professional, you want to look like you're already a staff assistant in your photograph. I don't want to see anybody's hand because your buddy at a fraternity gathering, you and your boy are like, I don't want to see any hair from someone else. A nice professional looking photograph, which anybody can take. You don't need to pay money to go have a photographer do it, but just look the part, look like a staff assistant. And then you send these emails out. These LDs are then going to either respond to you with, yes, I'd love to speak with you, or I'm so sorry, we're not going to do internships in COVID, or we're going to see how it goes. Let me get back to you. Or the best thing of all is they forward your email to the person in the office who's the intern coordinator. The intern coordinator is going to reach out. You'll do an informal telephone call. You may do a Zoom, a video conference, and then that's how it begins. And this summer, we started, not only did we have college kids doing internships, we started having high school kids doing internships. And they did these internships from home. They were talking to constituents on their phones from home all over the US. And this year we've had people in professional jobs. They interviewed with the LD, they interviewed with the chief, and they never once did an interview in person. Every single interview, not to get an internship, but to get a real job, was all digital.
Wow. And so do we think that as we move through this, that's going to continue to be the case?
Yeah.
And so if I'm now a graduating senior, I've been an intern last year for another member of the house. Now I want to get a full-time job. Am I following that same process? Am I sending an email to the LD to start? Where are we going to right now?
Absolutely. And keep in mind, the members who served on the committee that your member, when you were an intern, served on, will know the name of that member. So if I'm putting together the list, it's hard to see this, but if I'm thinking about who I would want to work for, I would have 25 House members, 5 US senators, and I would take the committees that have jurisdiction on the issues that I care about, and I would look up the committee that my former boss, when I was an intern, served on, and I would reach out to the LD of every single one of those members. And in my email, I would add a sentence that says, I was very fortunate to serve last year in the office of Congressman Burgess, who sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And they will say, oh, wow, that's amazing. We know Congressman Burgess. We know James Decker, who's a wonderful guy and the chief of staff. Hey, Decker, how you doing? I just got a very informal email from this guy. He says he was an intern. How was he? Oh, yeah, he was a good guy. I think he's trying to get a foothold. We really loved him. We don't have an opening. Yeah, so make sure that internship is on your LinkedIn account. Make sure, absolutely, it's on the resume. And feel free. Don't be really elaborate in your email. Short and sweet emails are the way to go. But feel free to mention, I was a legislative intern. I served the office of, and I love the experience, because that people will take hold of that, because you know your way around the halls of Congress. You're not a first timer. Every little bit of value, we want to squeeze every drop of value out of everything you got.
Absolutely. So that's perfect. So walking back and forth through questions here, I thought this was an interesting question from Grant Hill. Does the district office experience that a student might have give you an advantage when trying to get into DC?
Massive, massive advantage. In the district office, it's 75% casework, 25% policy, and it's the opposite here on the Hill. 75% policy, 25% casework. I've had people in the past who worked in a district office and they were young and they wanted to come to DC. I had one guy in particular who was in a district office alone. He was the only person in an office 8 hours a day by himself. That doesn't sound fun to me. It certainly wasn't fun to him. He asked the district director, if he could go to DC, and they made it happen so that he came to DC on the payroll for a month. They gave him work to do in DC, and they said, listen, we have nothing open for you in DC, but we're going to keep you on the payroll for 1 month, and that's all you get. When that month is over, you're a free agent, because we don't need you in DC, but we support you and we know what you're doing. So if you worked in the district and you want to come to DC, very casually make it known appropriately, be sensitive to the district director, but just let it also just realize that if you want to make this happen, you got to make it happen. And if you want to come to DC, you have to make it happen. And what you can do is, if you're a district staffer, you have access to the entire email directory for all of Congress. So think about other members throughout the state. Let's just say that this person who asked the question is from California. If your district office doesn't have any DC openings, or you don't really feel like they're going to be a champion for you, start emailing all of the legislative directors or comms directors or chiefs in the California delegation. Good afternoon. I hope you're well. By way of background, I'm a district staffer in California. It has been an honor to serve the Congresswoman. I am looking to serve in Washington, D.C., and I'm just reaching out for wisdom. You don't want to talk about openings. You just want to build relationships. You are never going to get a job on the Hill in the first conversation. You will never close the deal in the first conversation. So what you want to do is build up communication and get these calls and get these Zooms and get, if you can get a coffee, great, but they're hard to get. Build up these relationships so that when you start on the Hill, you got a job that was not advertised, which is 90% of the jobs are never advertised. And you already know 50 people. I want you to create a network out of thin air. And then when you get your job on the Hill, you don't have to ask your LD questions, and you don't have to ask your chief of staff questions. You can ask these 50 people that you've built this great relationship with, and just you can text them and say, hey, do I file this under Article 7 or Article 8? Build this massive network in DC. And yes, having district office experience is considered Hill experience. It's not like you're not here in DC, you're not working on writing it, but it definitely counts, and you can maximize it to the fullest.
So I think this is a good jump to the next part of building off of what you've already spoken about. So Daryl Watkins, who's a member at Penn State, asks, what kind of questions should I ask the LD when we speak to them on the phone? But let's sort of narrow that down a little bit, sir. What do you want to share with them? You as a young political science graduate, maybe you have some internship experience in a district office or with a state legislator, which is very common these days. You want to make the jump to DC. How do you make yourself stand out in terms of either your training or your interests in policy beyond what you spoke about earlier, which is sort of a knowledge of the district area of your state, of sort of the resources there? What would you tell Daryl for that?
All right. So there's several great questions in there. Let's start off with a couple tips. And also I'm going to break down kind of the reality of life. If you are interested in specific interests, healthcare, energy policy, when you're getting going on the Hill, you're not going to work on that stuff. No one is going to come to a 23-year-old and say, you need to overhaul the Affordable Care Act. It takes time, and you pay your dues, and you be a legislative correspondent and a staff assistant, a committee clerk. And then over time, you become a senior advisor and a chief of staff and a legislative director, and you play a substantive role in the policy. So just don't think that you're going to just show up on day one and fix everything that's wrong at the VA system. That's not how it works. It takes some time. This is the government. I want you to ask that LD a million questions. How did you get on the Hill? What do you envision for the 2021 agenda? What will happen if Vice President Biden wins? What will happen in Congress if the president wins? Do you feel as if the recently appointed Supreme Court justice will have a big impact on the congressional agenda? If the Democrats take the Senate and they take the White House, what will things look like in December and January in Capitol Hill? What is hands down the best advice you've ever been given as a staffer? As a staffer, what is the worst advice that you've ever been given? What are the qualities of a successful staff assistant? When you've seen legislative correspondents, press secretaries, legislative assistants really fall off the beam, What does that look like? Meaning, how do I avoid pitfalls? How do I avoid making mistakes? What would you say is the members' number one priority this year? And if I were to go about the process of finding a job, what tips can you give me? And then in all honesty, be a really good listener. And don't be the guy who asks a question and then doesn't listen to the answer. Because what is the point of the call? And also, don't be the guy that talks to somebody one time and then never follows up ever again, because that drives staffers crazy. They talk to somebody and then they never hear from them ever again. Show them that you're serious. Show them that you're committed. Follow up every 2 weeks. Hey, I just want to thank you so much for your tips, your wisdom, your suggestion. I just got a chance to speak to this chief of staff. And hey, I'm officially moving to Washington, D.C. on the 15th of November. I'm taking the plunge. I'm jumping in with both feet. And I can't thank you enough for all of your tips. If you show senior staffers who love helping people, they remember trying to get on Capitol Hill for the first time, and they love giving back, and they love helping you and helping the next generation. Show them that you're serious and follow up with them and follow their advice. And if you do that, you'll be very, very successful.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and for any job that people are looking for right now.
Yeah.
So nearly everyone who's joining us tonight is a Pi Sigma Alpha member. They are part of a network that is 300,000 people strong. And I know from members of Congress like Susan Collins or Alon Omar or Steny Hoyer, they're all members of Pi Sigma Alpha. So first of all, everyone listening, make sure you list your Pi Sigma Alpha membership on your resume and on your LinkedIn page. The network extends deep, and when an LD or someone else sees that, pay attention. They're going to pay attention. So here's a great question from Grant, though. I haven't been an intern before. How do I get access to the email addresses that I need to find to hit an LD or a chief of staff?
All right. So there are maybe 15 different directories that you can use to get these email addresses. Time on the Hill, the website that we created 10 years ago, has this information. But if you have access to your college or university portal, there's a good chance that they have it as well. I'm going to share my screen here with you all, and I will show you hopefully I did that. That looks good. Okay. So this is timeonthehill.com. This is a subscription website that has a small cancel anytime membership, because you can't afford to spend $3,000 a year on a expensive directory. So we provide this to our members. And I want to show you. So you go to timeonthehill.com, then you click on Staffer Directory, and then you click on whatever you want. And then from here, whoops, I have to log in, which I will do right now. All right. Welcome back. So you go to Staffer Email Directory. You go to Legislative Directors, and here they are. So this is every single office in the United States Congress, and this is every member and the LD. If you wanted to do, let's say that you wanted to get an internship, House Intern Coordinators. So here are the House Intern Coordinators, right? So this is just one option. There are many other platforms out there, and I will fill you in on a little tip. You'll notice that every single one of these emails has the same format. It's mail.house.gov, right? So let's say that you are absolutely broke and you don't have a penny to invest on this website or whatever. You could guess. You could say, all right, let's think about it. I'm going to give this a shot. Sean.Twombly at mail.house.gov or Sean_Twombly at kc.senate.gov. So you can crack the code that way. But to answer your question, which is a great question, like, okay, I've written this email, I want to send it off. Who's the LD and what's their email? It's all on our website. It's $14.99 a month. There's no contract. You can do it for a month. You can do it for a year, whatever. But I hope that answers that question.
No, that's perfect. In fact, everyone, I want you to let you know that Pi Sigma Alpha will be working with Time on the Hill to get members access different points, and we'll release more information on that later, because I think that sort of access is so critical for those students, rather than having them digging around on public search engines hoping they can crack some code. But don't hesitate to talk to your department chair, to your faculty advisor, to anyone in your department. They know what alums are working on the Hill, and they know how to make some of those connections as well. So don't lose track of that.
And if I could follow up on that phenomenal point, let us say, for example, let's say that young man, he went to Penn State. He's a Nittany Lion, right? So I'm going to share this screen again, because it is, to Sean's point, it is so powerful as a networking and outreach tool to reach out to your alumni. So that young man who's a Penn State either alum or current student, every summer we go through all of Congress and we find everybody on the Hill that went to your university. So Sean went to Syracuse. I got my master's at Syracuse. I went to the Newhouse School for my master's degree. So I would want to reach out to the University of Richmond students, and I would want to reach out to the Syracuse alum. And let's see here, we got Syracuse right here. So there are over 70 people on Capitol Hill that went to Syracuse. That subject line would be the same, thank you, but you would insert a little line in that message. Hi, thank you in advance for your time. By way of background, I am a Penn State student trying to learn as much as I can about congressional service. I'm reaching out to leaders in Congress who are Penn State alum. And if you have a moment, I would be grateful for your time. And I guarantee you that this network is grossly underused. Grossly underused. And if you were to ask the typical Hill staffer, how many people emailed you this year from your college? I guarantee you that over 90% of the 15,000 congressional staffers will tell you that I've had 3 people or less email me from Pepperdine, University of Texas, Syracuse. So don't be bashful. And I'll give you one tiny little story, because it's just so. Had a young man, Michigan State alum. I said, let's please reach out to everybody that went to Michigan State. He did. There happened to be a guy in Leader McCarthy's office, Michigan State. This senior policy person with Kevin McCarthy went so above and beyond out of his way to help this young guy who he did not even know at all. But because the policy director was Michigan State and this young guy was Michigan State, and this young guy was a really great kid and a wonderful candidate, just a really pleasant, great guy. He's now, I mentioned you, there's only 3 people that are interning with Kevin McCarthy. That kid is one of those 3 people. And it's because he used his college alumni network. So I'm so grateful that Sean made that point, because I probably wouldn't have even mentioned this. And it is so helpful. Make sure that you share your Pi Sigma Alpha, and make sure you're talking to your college alumni, because very few people use that.
Yeah, absolutely. And build it up too, right? I mean, go Cuse, right? We are, yeah. I mean, whenever I finish an email with a Pi Sigma Alpha alum who I know where they went to school, I try and find something relatable to comment on at the end, whether it be sports or whether it be alums or something along those lines. So Grant Hill, who's not from Duke, but who's from Rhodes, who was asking some of these great questions, says, where is the best place to put our Pi Sigma Alpha credential, on LinkedIn or a resume? I mean, generally, I would say that it goes under your honors, right? It goes.
No doubt. So on the resume, it's absolutely the section that I would put on the resume would be the header of that section would be towards the bottom, and it would be below education. Education would not be at the top because people on the Hill care about your experience more so than your education. So it would be your steak and potatoes experience, then your campaign work, hopefully, then your education, and then honors and awards. And Pi Sigma Alpha should absolutely be there. Other great awards would be University Dean's List, Latin Honors. I love Eagle Scout because I just think it's very rare and still, in the eyes of most members, a very prestigious award. Just don't overdo it. I've seen like 12 awards or whatever. When you have that many awards, you really water them down. So just take your 3 most powerful awards: Pi Sigma Alpha, University Dean's List, and Pi Beta Kappa, or whatever it may be.
No, absolutely. So I want to wrap some of this stuff up by expanding it a little bit off of Capitol Hill, which I know is your wheelhouse. But a lot of students are going to say that they'd like to end up in an executive branch agency. In sort of the navigating that world in general, do you think it's easier or harder to find a spot off the Hill, but in DC in one of the executive agencies?
All right. So there's 3 different places. There's on the Hill, there's the agencies, and then there's off the Hill. I consider kind of like the private sector lobbying advocacy association world. Most candidates who want to come to DC are open to both on the Hill and off the Hill as long as they have a job. If I can get a job in DC and get some cash flow going, I can still continue to work on getting on the Hill. If you're talking about agency in terms of the administration, you're dealing with USA Jobs, which is a unique ball of wax because there's an algorithm that searches the candidates. USA Jobs is pretty serious. What you have to do is you have to apply, follow the proper protocol always, do USA Jobs, but then network your tail off to get somebody to flag your resume in USA Jobs. And best example of this was a gentleman who was Air Force for many years. He was the head counsel for the House Committee on Ethics. So he's a veteran, and he has Hill experience, and he has a law degree. He was a couple years away from retiring. He had a fishing boat. He had his retirement plan, but he wanted 3 more years of federal service before retirement. He wanted to be just a bare bones rank and file lawyer at the VA. Applied through USA Jobs and absolutely could not get a phone call. He's a veteran, federal employee, the lead counsel in the House Ethics Committee, and he can't even get a phone call for an interview. Got him flagged, and then once he was flagged, and once it gets rolling, then he was fine, and he got that job. And that was 2 or 3 years ago, so maybe by now he's retired. He's fishing. But you must apply through USA Jobs, and then you have to work your tail off to network to get flagged, and then that way you can get going.
No, that's super helpful. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up right about now because I think this is some fantastic content. So everyone that's been watching and everyone that will watch, keep asking those questions. I'm going to try and get Brent back in March when we do the Pi Sigma Alpha National Student Research Conference in a virtual setting to help us talk again about more broadly working in Washington, where we'll bring in some other Pi Sigma Alpha members to give their experiences. But until then, Brent, thank you so much, my friend, as always. To everyone watching, keep in mind that tomorrow, Wednesday the 28th, is Pi Sigma Alpha Pin Day to help mark our centennial. So those Pi Sigma Alpha members who have a pin, make sure you wear it and tag us on social media with the hashtag PSA Pin Day. And we'll continue our next centennial series with looking at law school. So that's coming up in November. Brent, again, thank you, my friend. And everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You work your tail off. I'm so grateful for you.
Oh, my pleasure. I hope I'll see you soon. All right. Good night, everyone.